The Baltimore Orioles needed some help for 2024 after losing their closer for the year because of Tommy John surgery, which absolutely blew because that closer, Felix Bautista, was arguably the best, in all of baseball. He was incredible, but in this day and age, you just gotta accept the inevitable, like his elbow barking. And so, needing a new guy for at least this season, the Orioles went out and signed Craig Kimbrel to a one-year deal. And this, of course, didn't set the world on fire or anything, but it was definitely, at least at the time, seemingly a good move to make. Kimbrel is past his prime, we all know that, but he still threw hard, he was healthy, and he should do for now. And although I think Phillies fans in particular were warning Orioles fans and expecting Kimbrel to be terrible, I don't think anyone really foresaw just how bad things ended up turning out. But what it really is a continuation of a long trend now. Really quick, if you're alive, like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet, or just wait to see if you enjoy the video and then make a decision. That works too. Now, the weird thing about Craig Kimbrel is you can legitimately make the argument that he's a Hall of Famer. In fact, he probably will be a Hall of Famer. First ballot. And if you think that sounds crazy, just basing off of pure statistics, he pretty obviously should be. Based off the eye test in recent years and the numbers too, most people would call that crazy. Understandably so. But Kimbrel ranks 5th all-time in saves, has a career 2.59 ERA. He's 3rd all-time in career strikeouts by relievers. I mean, think about that. Only 2 relievers in baseball history are ahead of Kimbrel in strikeouts, and both are guys who played in the 70s. So he's objectively one of the top relievers in all of baseball in the last 50 years, even though that may seem hard to believe right now. But there's also a valid reason why it's hard to believe all that right now. And it goes back beyond just this year and Kimbrel's time in Baltimore. In 2010, Kimbrel's first crack at the big leagues as a 22-year-old with the Braves, he threw only 20 innings, but he was fantastic in those innings, striking out 2 people in every one of them. His ERA was .44 in that span. I mean, it was incredible. And the best part for him and Atlanta was that this was only a preview of what was to come, because the very next season, Kimbrel led the league in saves, was named an All-Star, got Cy Young votes and MVP votes, along with winning Rookie of the Year. And all of those things stayed the same over the next 3 years, other than the Rookie of the Year award, because you unfortunately can only be a rookie once. But Kimbrel couldn't have been more filthy. His ERA in 2012 was 1.01. 1.01. Think about that for a second. And he averaged almost 17 strikeouts per 9 innings. That is absurd. And after getting traded to San Diego before the 2015 season, he'd end his Braves career with a 1.43 ERA. Someone who allowed less than a runner on per inning, averaged 15 strikeouts per 9. I mean, it was ridiculous. His strikeout numbers stayed dominant in San Diego, although his ERA rose. Now, for Kimbrel's ERA to rise meant still having an ERA any reliever or pitcher at all would kill to have. But after getting traded again, 2 times now in the span of less than a year, this time to Boston, Kimbrel's ERA rose again to almost 3.5 in 2016, despite having the best strikeout numbers since 2012. But by 2017, Kimbrel was completely back to the dominant force he was in Atlanta, pitching to an ERA of 1.43 with a strikeouts per 9 of over 16, finishing 6th in the Cy Young voting, which for a reliever is incredible. And then came 2018, and I think it's safe to say this was the beginning of a new era for Kimbrel. Actually, no, it was more of like the prologue to a new era for Kimbrel, a little bridge period from being the best closer in baseball to becoming what he is now. He was still good in 2018. He had a 2.74 ERA, struck out a lot of guys. He was named to his 3rd straight All-Star team and 7th overall, but he was not really that comfortable for Red Sox fans to watch. He was a little shaky, at least for the standards of what you hope your closer to be, especially someone like Kimbrel with his name, but again, he was still good. And then came the postseason, and he wasn't shaky anymore. He was just bad. Like, really bad. He just got smoked out there. Like, he basically became batting practice, so much so to the point that Alex Cora had to be extra creative and use all of his starters and relief roles at different times throughout their World Series run. Thank God for everyone else who came up clutch in the bullpen and rotation, because Kimbrel only held them back. I mean, even in the games he saved, it was plays like this that saved the game, not Kimbrel. So I don't think it was that hard for the Red Sox to say goodbye after 2018, but it also was apparently easy for everyone else to say I'm good too, as nobody signed Kimbrel during that offseason. This was the same offseason that had Bryce Harper and Manny Machado waiting until spring training to sign with their respective teams and eventually getting the contracts they were hoping for. But Kimbrel went as far as to wait all the way until June to sign a deal, ending up with the Cubs for $43 million over 3 years. So he had a lot of time off, and the rush showed. He was terrible. His ERA was over 6.5. He gave up 9 home runs despite only pitching 20 innings. It was basically the anti-version of his 2010 season, his pre-rookie season, where he couldn't have been more dominant. He couldn't have been worse now, 9 years later, and this was the beginning of Kimbrel not being as dominant as he used to be, something he probably won't ever be again. In 2020, he pitched just 15 innings and had an ERA over 5, but then came 2021, and Kimbrel actually began the year as good as possible. His ERA was 0.49, he was striking out the world, he was great. The Cubs, unfortunately, were not, and so they traded him to the most miserable place on planet Earth that makes hell look like Toys R Us, the Chicago White Sox. But this was different, because this year, 2021, was the year the White Sox were actually good. So he's back on a winning team, he's having a tremendous season, back to being an all-star, so of course he ends up shitting the bed, pitching to an ERA over 5 after the trade. And since then, Kimbrel's been passed around more than... I can think of a lot of dirty jokes here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stay appropriate. So this is one of those moments where you can fill in the blank yourself. But he get traded to the Dodgers in the very beginning of the 2022 season, and his numbers were fine that year. By the end of the year, he wasn't the team's closer anymore. And after the end of the year, neither was he a Dodger. So off he signs with the Phillies, and again, his numbers, fine, nothing special. I mean, he had moments where he was filthy, like when he won NL Reliever of the Month for June after putting up a nice 0.69 ERA, but overall he was just whatever. And during that year's postseason run with Philly, he was right back to the guy Boston fans were all too familiar with from 2018, being maybe the biggest reason as to why the Phillies lost the NLCS and had their season end. He was good through the first 4 outings, he actually hadn't given up any runs, but then the Phillies took a 2-0 series lead over the Diamondbacks, and Kimbrel said, "I got you, Arizona," giving up a walk-off single in Game 3 before blowing Game 4, becoming the first Phillies pitcher to lose back-to-back appearances in the playoffs since 1993. So when the Orioles swooped in to sign Kimbrel as their closer for 2024, all of Philadelphia collectively said,
"Not a great plan."
And they were right, but in an even more extreme way than most thought, because Kimbrel wasn't awful in 2023, he wasn't even really bad. He just wasn't really good or reliable, though. I think that's the better word to use, reliable. He wasn't reliable. And he started off his time as an Oriole pretty damn good. Then there was this little stretch where he was awful, but then he was back to being good again, like really good. There was a stretch this year from May 10th through July 7th where hitters were hitting under 100 against Kimbrel. In other words, not much hitting was going on at all. He was striking guys out. His ERA was .43 in this time, and he was awesome in this 2-month span of time. Then came his next outing a week later, and yeah, it hasn't been good, and that's being like really nice. Since July 14th, Kimbrel's thrown 18 innings with an ERA of 11.5. He walked almost as many hitters as he struck out. Hitters are heading over 300 against him. His ERA ballooned from 2.10 to 5.33, and he hasn't recorded a single save. I mean, he was the complete opposite than the way he was in that first stretch I talked about. He has 6 blown saves this season, and his latest disaster came in what ended up being his last as an Oriole. It wasn't a save opportunity. The Orioles were already down 4-0 in the 9th inning, so it was basically just Kimbrel getting some work out there, trying to get a groove back, but 6 Giants runs later, he was knocked out of the game before even being able to get 3 outs, soon after being knocked off the whole damn team, getting designated for assignment. And this sucks. It really does. There's never been anything about Kimbrel that should make any of us hate him as a person. He seems normal and cool. No drama really, like at all. So you gotta feel for the guy. But on the mound, total opposite of no drama. And it's been this way for 5 years now. 5. I understood the Orioles getting him because I never really expected him to be dominant or anywhere close to what he was in Atlanta, obviously, but just good or good enough. But he ended up not even being close to that. He's just been unplayable at this point, hence the decision to drop him. To drop what very well may be a future Hall of Famer. Let me know your thoughts and thank you for watching.